Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar on the science of supporting your workforce through COVID-19. I'm Bree Harvey, Achievers Employee Engagement Evangelist. Yes, that's a real job title. And I couldn't be any more thrilled to be here with you today because over the next hour, we're going to talk about some of the research and findings that the Workforce Institute has put together over the last month to help guide your organization through the return to work process. Before we get started, a few super exciting housekeeping items. JK, they're not that exciting, but listening will probably eliminate 90% of the questions we typically get within the first few minutes. Starting with the fact you've all been muted upon entry. However, we would absolutely love your participation as we've carved out some time at the end for a live Q&A. So please don't be shy and use the Q&A panel as you have questions throughout the presentation. Lastly, we will be sending out a recording of the webinar in the next 48 hours so you can rewatch it or share it to your heart's content. Let's take a look at our agenda for the day. We're going to start out with some quick introductions. Then we're going to talk about resilience, what it is, why it matters, and how you can build it in your organization. We'll then unpack some key considerations regarding the physical return to the workplace. And finally, we'll look at some resources for measuring, monitoring, and taking action so you can actually move the dial on resilience and ensure your return to work strategy is sound. I am so excited to introduce Dr. Natalie Baumgartner to all of you. She's the Chief Workforce Scientist at Achievers, which means she leads our efforts to ensure that everything we do, from our technology to our thought leadership, is rooted in science. She also leads the Workforce Institute, which we'll talk about in a moment. Dr. Natalie describes herself as a culture and engagement nerd, and she has a PhD in clinical psychology, plus more than 20 years of experience in researching and consulting on culture and engagement. She's a TED speaker, a regular contributor to Harvard Business Review and Forbes. Dr. Natalie, welcome, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Bree. I am excited to be here and to have an opportunity to talk about a topic that I know is relevant to all of us on this call, managing an organization through this ongoing crisis, and also about how to guide a physical return to work as well. But before we dive in, I wanted to give you a bit of context, as Bree mentioned, on the Achievers Workforce Institute, which is the source for the information and the perspective that I'll be sharing with you today. The Workforce Institute is the science and research arm of Achievers. By design, we're a cross-functional team of passionate leaders in data science and product, customer success, marketing, and more. And we all work together to bring a workforce science focus to everything we do here at Achievers. And there are two main outputs of the work that we do. The first is thought leadership. We translate academic and business research into digestible and usable insights that we then share through articles and outlets like Bree mentioned, Forbes and Harvard Business Review, and also through our own Workforce Institute insight papers and reports, because our goal is to make workforce science accessible to all business leaders. The second key area of output for the Workforce Institute is our focus on guiding the development of Achievers products. All of our technology and services, they're built on a foundation of rigorous science, and that means that they evolve as science evolves. Okay, so moving on from the Workforce Institute, let's just talk a little bit about the focus of today's webinar. Achievers' vision is to change the way the world works. And so when the pandemic began, we saw an opportunity to help employers support and engage their workforces during this really challenging period. I mean, crisis is when people are most vulnerable, including employees across every industry and role. As an organization, we wanted to look at several ways to give back to the business arena, all of which called upon the Workforce Institute to begin with science. by creating a model that we could use to guide a pandemic support response across our entire organization. We began that effort by looking at research and best practices that have been proven to support employee resilience during critical events. We dove deep into the academic literature and made the most of all of those years of experience in empowering organizations to engage their staff, regardless of the circumstances around them. And our goal was to help employers and managers provide support to every employee, which we know is highly predictive of good outcomes for both individuals and companies. A science-backed approach is the most likely way to get you the highest impact results. When you have to act fast, it's best to act on data, not assumptions.
Yeah, and I think because to a degree we're all kind of making it up as we go, it's easy to slip into making those assumptions. It's easy to forget that there's a tremendous amount of evidence-based clues out there that we should be looking to help guide us. So, Dr. Natalie, I'd love for you to talk about resilience and why it's so important for the workforce given the circumstance.
Great. Well, let me start to answer that by talking about what resilience is. Simply, the ability to recover quickly from adversity. It's that intangible trait that allows one person or a group of people to bounce back faster than another, even under comparable circumstances. So not only does resilience speed up productive responses when those setbacks occur, but it's also been shown to influence a whole variety of psychosocial factors by acting as a buffer against workplace stress. And what's more, resilience has been linked with greater physical and mental health outcomes over time as well. In addition, employees experiencing resilience tend to build higher quality connections and relationships with each other, characterized by this effective communication and higher levels of trust as well. So when you think about how the concept of resilience applies to the workplace, it might at first seem that resilient organizations are just collections of many resilient people, right? Well, that's not quite the case. Every individual can operate with resilience, and while more people operating with resilience is absolutely better for organizational performance, large numbers of resilient people alone doesn't make for a resilient workplace. Workplace resilience is developed by systematically building a number of factors within your organization that'll ensure that your company can withstand or recover quickly from change, whether it's planned or not.
One thing you've written a lot about since the onset of the pandemic is the importance of distinguishing between recovery and resilience. Can you explain what can be misleading about the term recovery?
Yeah, I'm happy to. During this time of the COVID pandemic, we are settling into a new normal, which has some organizations looking forward to a recovery stage. However, our research suggests that we can't consider ourselves in a recovery stage with the pandemic still in full play. Now, I believe that organizations need to focus less on a premature sense of recovery and more on establishing resilience for the long term, that ability to manage through the ongoing challenge of the pandemic today, but also to manage through other non-pandemic related challenges over the months and years to come. A lot of thought leaders right now are talking about moving into that recovery stage of the COVID-19 pandemic. And at the Workforce Institute, we believe that terminology and that lens of recovery overlooks the fact that the vast majority of organizations and individuals aren't in recovery yet. Recovery requires certainty about the way forward or a confirmed return to the status quo. That's not yet the reality of this pandemic. And given that, we knew that we needed to look for ways to build and support resilience in our organizations at every level and for every team, because we are, all of us, living in a time of uncertainty, both today and for an infinite period of time to come. This is our new normal. And what's more, empirical research has long demonstrated that uncertainty breeds stress, mental and physical health challenges, and just lower levels of productivity for most people.
That makes sense. I think it was Josh Bersin who declared that we're officially in a VUCA era, which basically means the only change the only constant will continue to be change. And I think your point is so spot on. Businesses need to accept the reality that we're going to be forced to operate with a level of uncertainty and ambiguity, and now's the time to focus on building a resilient organization. But the question I think a lot of people have in our minds right now is, how do you get there when things around us are moving so quickly?
That's a great question. So let's just talk for a few minutes about how to set up organizations for success during times of change. Having a culture of engagement and recognition is one of the key factors in developing a resilient workforce, not just in times of transition, but every day, to minimize employee stress, burnout, and detachment. Resilient organizations, they're like putty. They're stretched and pulled and twisted, and yet they still hold their shape. The main way they achieve that sort of resilience is through engaged and aligned employees. That way, when adversity hits, people are still there with a positive, we can do this outlook. Now, at Achievers, we know that most organizations need to improve their workplace resilience. This isn't based on a hunch. In fact, recent data from the Harvard Business Review provides evidence to support this concept. Now, first, just 12% of executives say that their efforts to promote a culture of resilience have been successful, meaning that almost 9 out of 10 leaders do not believe that they currently have a culture of resilience. Second, 41% of leaders express confidence in their organization's ability to withstand challenge. Now, I'll note that this survey was conducted prior to COVID-19, so it's likely that we would see even less optimal results today as organizations struggle with the unexpected change that came with the pandemic. And finally, just 16% of executives reported that their organizations could effectively minimize disruption from continuous change. That means that more than 8 out of 10 leaders believe continuous change disrupts their organization. And overall, these statistics show us that workplace resilience is rare and is difficult to build and maintain. Now, the Workforce Institute has identified 3 pillars of workplace resilience. The first is culture alignment. This is the degree to which every decision and action an organization takes is aligned with their organizational values. Now, I'm not going to go into detail on this pillar today because it really deserves a webinar of its own. And if you're interested in learning more about culture alignment, I've actually done a few webinars on this topic, which you can find in the resources section at achievers.com. The second pillar of workplace resilience, though, is continuous conversation. And that's where I'm going to focus my time right now, looking at what you should be talking about and how you can facilitate an ongoing two-way conversation with your workforce. And finally, the third pillar of workplace resilience is active engagement, the extent to which your employees are engaged at their company and in their roles. We've defined 3 components of active engagement. Employees should be advocates of the company, they should be committed to their role, and they should be enthusiastic about their jobs. Advocacy, commitment, and enthusiasm are the 3 core tenets of active engagement. And we'll talk more about active engagement during our time together today. Now, before we move on to the bulk of the presentation, I'm curious how often you're surveying your team. A poll should be popping up on your screen now asking how frequently you regularly survey for employee feedback. The options are less than once a year, 1 to 2 times a year, or more than twice a year. So please go ahead and complete that now. And the reason while you're doing that I'm curious about this is that we're seeing some changes in the market in terms of how often people are surveying their employees, and I'm interested to know where you all fall in that trend. Okay. We'll give just a few more seconds, and then we'll go ahead and take a look at the results. Great. So as we can see, everyone is in a different place in their engagement surveying journey. Most of you are conducting about once or twice a year. And the good news is that asking is the first step to driving resilience. And so you're all well on your way. Okay, now that we've reviewed the 3 pillars of workplace resilience, let's talk about the drivers, the levers you can pull to improve resilience. I'll start with communication. This is really the first driver you should be thinking about as you start measuring and working on resilience and engagement. Vacuums of information are what land many companies in hot water. One of the biggest threats to engagement is fear, not knowing what's going on with leadership, or even worse, whether you have job security. When an organization isn't being communicative, employees are left with this spiraling thought pattern of what if. So, to create a sense of ease during times of change, establish a way for leadership to speak consistently and clearly about the shifts that are afloat. Even if answers aren't yet available or decisions not yet made, that acknowledgement of change and just the reassurance planning that's occurring around that change can go a really long way to foster a better sense of security and comfort. Now, ensure that this communication is aligned with your company's culture and values. And whenever possible, provide context around why the change is happening and what business opportunity that change can create. For example, accompanying a change in leadership with a statement such as, bringing in someone with this type of expertise is going to allow us to align with our value of X. That kind of statement creates clarity regarding both the purpose behind and the value alignment of that leadership change. The messages that organizations send can either instill a sense of chaos or provide a solid measure of clarity and reassurance. So be really thoughtful with your delivery. One of the most powerful ways to manage uncertainty is through information sharing. You need to receive information that's both timely and credible. Research shows that employees are more quickly able to cope with change when they believe they're being kept in the loop with relevant, accurate information. The three pillars of effective information sharing are consistency, transparency, and balance. Consistency refers to the fact that your communication should be frequent, accurate, and specific. If possible, it should come from the same senior leader to ensure a consistent voice and be planful and thoughtful in your communication. Ad hoc messaging really just doesn't cut it here. The second pillar of effective information sharing is transparency. Now, transparency can feel challenging during a crisis. You may wonder where to draw the line, whether there are limits to what you can share. Research, though, shows that transparency during a critical event enhances organizational trust, increases job engagement, and improves how employees view their company overall. Effective transparency will ensure that information is sufficient and accessible, embraces accountability and authenticity, and encourages participation and openness. Finally, what do we mean by balance in information sharing? Well, academics talk about promotion-oriented and prevention-oriented communication. Basically, one focuses on growth and ideals, while the other looks at risks and responsibilities. And leaders need to include both forms of communication because your employees will surely be at different places regarding their relationship to this crisis, with some focused on the positive and what's next, and others still focusing on the risks. The latest academic research demonstrates that promotion-oriented communication becomes more important in a crisis because people are already pretty focused on the negative, so bringing an optimistic, forward-looking viewpoint becomes really valuable. Okay. Next driver I want to talk about is well-being. A strong correlation exists between crisis and personal stress, and that stress can lead to physical and mental health challenges. If well-being is compromised, everything else comes to a standstill. An important tool for improving well-being lies in training managers to be active and engaged. Passive leadership, or leading without sufficient connection, is harmful to well-being. Research shows that passive leadership is correlated with employee burnout and physical symptoms, along with greater levels of work-life balance conflict, while positive manager relationship behavior in the form of support and trust building really promotes employee well-being at work. Beyond supporting your managers, there are a few other tactics you can take to encourage well-being. One of those is to encourage employees to take part in physical activity. Now, while in the past that might have meant subsidizing gym memberships, in today's world of social distancing, it might instead mean supporting virtual run clubs or hosting video yoga sessions. At Achievers, we've historically held a weekly yoga session, and that session's now been converted to a remote experience that allows all of us employees to take part virtually during their lunch break. And I'm really grateful for that. Another technique to address well-being is a focus on mindfulness. Mindfulness can reduce burnout and anxiety, depression, and stress. A couple of ways to encourage your workforce to engage in mindfulness practices include providing mindfulness workshops or hosting weekly meditation sessions. Overall, well-being is fundamental to the success and the effectiveness of your people during this time, so it's a key ingredient of workplace resilience. Our next driver is contact. specifically contact with one's manager. Ensuring that your employees have sufficient contact with leaders and managers is a crucial tool in times of challenge. And in fact, meaningful contact will amplify all of the other drivers we talked about today. Employees who regularly meet with their managers are nearly 50% more likely to be engaged. A recent Harvard Business Review survey found that employees place high value on having their remote managers check in consistently and regularly. And that can be achieved through a weekly one-on-one or a communication tool that can be used daily like Teams or Slack. What's most important is that leaders are able to provide support to employees no matter where they're working from. So encourage your managers to schedule weekly check-ins and to have informal chats as well to keep that communication flowing freely with their direct reports. I'd also really strongly encourage managers to use video when they connect with their direct reports. Zoom is the new meeting room. And that's because body language is a key aspect of human communication for human beings. So using video for calls is likely to improve those feelings of camaraderie and connection with one another. In fact, the study from the Fraunhofer Institute shows that people concentrate better, feel tasks are divided more fairly, and also report discussions to be more open when using video conferencing. Overall, manager contact is critical for employee success. From the frequency to the quality of that contact, there are so many tools that exist today to help, but a key factor for success is the availability and ability of your managers to communicate clearly. If there's only one thing you change in this new normal, increase contact with your people. And while we're on contact, it's also important to ensure that employees have sufficient contact with their own colleagues. Evidence shows that maintaining relationships with coworkers lowers the risk of burnout and increases motivation and morale. Now, one way to help build in collegial connection is to encourage peer-to-peer recognition. A study from Harvard Business School found that recognition from internal beneficiaries, in other words, contact in the form of recognition between colleagues, can dramatically increase motivation and performance. While peer recognition can cost your company nothing, it has a significant and measurable impact on productivity and on business outcomes. I'd also suggest that you find ways to encourage informal or water cooler conversations. During a regular in-person workday, people typically interact with their colleagues dozens of times, while in remote work scenarios, they may only connect when they have a work-related reason. So impromptu and informal conversations between colleagues, those form a critically important link to social connections and friendships and support networks. This type of contact between colleagues is really vital to engagement, especially during times of crisis. So you can host remote social hours and encourage the use of communication tools like those Teams or Slack apps to facilitate informal chats. Achievers has long held a monthly Thursday Throwdown where employees from all parts of the organization meet and socialize. During the pandemic, we've simply taken the Thursday Throwdown online. And I know many organizations that are holding their own happy or yappy hours to help maintain this type of contact. Rather than viewing this as taking away from work hours, consider it crucial relationship building to help your employees maintain contact with their colleagues. Moving on, let's discuss the driver of balance. There's no doubt that work-life balance inevitably suffers in times of crisis. Some of this can't be changed, but offering sufficient support and just checking in to see how employees are feeling about their ability to balance work and personal obligations is extremely important. Studies show that balance begins at the top. Harvard Business Review research demonstrated that the attitude of management is crucial to instilling a culture of work-life balance. Employees who work with a supportive supervisor, they report reduced work-life conflict, improved health, and increased fulfillment on the job and at home. So one of the first ways you can encourage better work-life balance is by modeling it from the top. Leaders and managers need to ensure that they're switching off, taking vacation time, setting realistic deadlines, maintaining reasonable expectations of their people. Only 1 in 10 employees say that the work habits of their boss makes it easy for them to have a good work-life balance, and that's a problem. Another tool for supporting work-life balance is allowing for work-life flexibility. Whenever possible, offer flexible work hours to accommodate personal life necessities like the doctor or dental appointments or daycare drop-off and pickup times. And understand that employees working from home may take breaks to walk the dog or do laundry. Supporting management of these personal needs helps your employees perform better during their working hours and helps them better manage their work-life balance. The next driver I want to discuss is resources. Ensuring that employees have the resources they need to achieve success in their role is critical, and having the tools and technology and plans necessary to effectively move through this unprecedented time is a major predictor of long-term success. There are a few things to focus on when you're thinking about support and resources. First is ensuring that you're taking a holistic view of resources. And by that, I mean that resources include physical tools, such as computers or safety equipment and specialist tools, but it can also include resources that are less obvious, like work relationships, supportive management, organizational level benefits. All of these types of resources, and so many more, impact employee well-being and organizational performance. Second, be sure to consider the hierarchy of resources. Research shows that it's important for workplaces to meet their employees' core needs first, as that then sets a foundation for meeting more sophisticated requirements over time. That means it's key to provide support such as basic tools and resources and safety equipment before working on things like career growth and stretch assignments. And while career growth is certainly a critical tool for retention, if you're not fulfilling employees' basic needs, they're not going to be motivated or productive enough to even think about a long-term career path. The easiest way to determine what the most critical resources are for your people is simply to ask employees about what they need to fulfill their commitments and meet their objectives. This doesn't mean that you need to provide every requested resource, but you should regularly assess support needs to set up every individual for success. Manager support. We already talked about manager contact and communication, but I want to speak more broadly about the driver of manager support. A supportive manager can make a huge difference in employee engagement, satisfaction, and performance. Studies show that managerial support of employees has both significant direct and indirect effects on perceived career success and retention. And it's important in building trust, contributing to strong employee organization relationships, and so on. Okay, so what does great manager support look like? We'll talk about 3 pillars of manager support. The first is communication. And I'm not going to go into detail there because we covered the finer points of manager communication when we talked about contact with managers. But suffice it to say that manager communication is critical to building a strong manager-employee relationship, and that managers should be meeting regularly with their teams to ensure an open, two-way dialogue. Listening is as if not more important than talking. So make sure that your managers are really taking time to hear what their teams have to say. The second pillar of manager support is being an advocate for employees. A manager's team should believe that their manager is on their side and doing their best to provide them with the resources and the recognition that they deserve. When managers don't advocate for their employees, trust can fail, and employees often feel that they would have been better left to figure things out on their own. The third pillar of a supportive manager is a focus on coaching and career development. Individuals consistently rate professional development as very important to job satisfaction, and a supportive manager will regularly think about ways in which their team members can grow and progress beyond their current role. When managers master all 3 of these areas, their teams are going to feel supported and recognized, which drives greater engagement and productivity. Finally, the last driver of workplace resilience is purpose. It's important to step back sometimes and ask why we're doing something. Seeing the greater purpose or meaning in one's work is a powerful motivator and driver. There's academic evidence that individuals who find meaning in their work have lower turnover intentions and are just more dedicated to their roles. So it makes sense for leaders to try to help individuals find a connection to greater purpose and meaning. How do you do that? Well, first, it's important as a company to have a big vision, something that's inspirational that you can strive for as an organization. At Achievers, as we've mentioned, our mission is to change the way the world works. It's a big mission, but we truly live it every day across the company. Our employees see that their mission comes to life in our planning and our impact, and they can easily connect their daily tasks to this bigger picture, which then they say inspires and motivates them, and I can personally attest to that as well. Managers can address purpose on a smaller scale as well by being clear about how each person uniquely and powerfully contributes to the big picture. They can further drive the sense of purpose home then by recognizing the efforts that everyone contributes and by finding ways to connect daily tasks to these broader business objectives. For those of us who've found purpose in our work, we know just how powerful that experience is. So it really behooves us to help others to find that connection as well.
Yes, that is such a comprehensive list of resilience drivers, Dr. Natalie. Thank you for that. We are going to shift gears a bit and talk about the actual physical return to the office. I was actually just listening in on a CHRO panel earlier this week, and I know it's a hot topic at the moment. But before we dig into Dr. Natalie's insights on return to work plans, we'd love to know where you are all at in your return to the workplace journey. You should see a poll popping up on your screen right about now. We want to hear from you. What are your plans for returning to the physical workplace? Have you recently started assimilating employees back into the office? Are you early adopters? Or are you planning on going back within the next 30 days? Are you planning on going back within the next 3 months? Or sometime in 2021? Are you not sure? Or is this question just not applicable to you because you have essential workers? I guess we could have technically added an option for we're never going back. Shopify's CEO recently released a statement about the end of office centricity, and they're having everyone work from home indefinitely. And I know Twitter's letting all their employees who want to work remotely forever as well. So it's definitely a mixed bag. I think that we're at Achievers. We're pegged to go back in October if all goes well. So let's check out the results. Okay, 13% of you have already been trickling employees back into the workplace. Wow, I love it. Another 13% are planning on going back within the next month. 53% are planning on going back within the next 3 months. That doesn't surprise me. Another 13% planning to return sometime in 2021. 6% you don't know. Bless. I think a lot. I'm surprised that number's not a little bit higher. Super interesting to get this insight. So, Dr. Natalie, what are some practical things HR should keep in mind as they assess their organization's readiness for that 6% or even that 53% that are thinking about going back in the next 3 months? What are some key areas they should be focusing on for a fully supported return to the workplace?
Great question. Let's just take a bit of time to talk now about those tactical areas that you'll want to be supporting and measuring if your organization is preparing to return to the physical workplace. Now, that transition has its own unique requirements, and you'll want to be sure that your employees feel supported throughout the process. The first area of focus with a return to the physical workplace that I want to talk about is safety. Now, I'm sure this is top of mind for most of us right now, our own personal safety and the safety of our friends and family. For a return to the physical workplace, you need to be gathering feedback on whether people feel safe doing so and identifying the activities or resources that would make them feel even safer. Now, I'm clearly not an expert on topics such as workplace sanitation, so I'm not going to be making specific suggestions here about the processes that you need to have in place to establish and maintain safe cleanliness during the pandemic. But I would strongly encourage you to listen to your employees about what matters to them. You can get great suggestions from the people who work in your workplace because they're the ones that are going to see the challenges and the opportunities for improvement every single day. One of our customers actually surveyed their employees, and based on employee feedback about COVID-related sanitation concerns, for example, requested that the organization add no-touch faucets to their bathrooms, among other key changes, which they did, and it was really well received. Safety is foundational to the return to the physical workplace, because without a sense of safety, your teams are going to be distracted and stressed about their return. Next, I want to talk about caretaking. Many people with children have limited options right now for childcare, even with school being out of session. And that's because many day camps are canceled and many daycares are still closed. That caretaking responsibility, it's an added stress for anyone in your organization that has children, particularly as they consider a return to the physical workplace. Now, I've specifically referred to this topic as caretaking, though, and not necessarily just childcare, because we also need to be addressing the needs of those folks who are also caring for elderly parents or just providing other caretaking needs. Talking about those challenges openly lets people know that they can bring their whole selves back to work, rather than having to pretend that critical topics like caretaking aren't an issue. So gathering that type of feedback, it's also going to provide you with insights into other challenges that your employees are facing that may take their focus away from work as they physically return. And your organization might be able to offer accommodations, such as work from home options for some folks or flexible hours to help address those employee concerns. Transportation. How your employees get to and from work, it may not have historically been top of mind for many organizations, but with the pandemic still persisting, being aware of any transportation challenges is really an important aspect of physical return to the work transition. There are even examples of organizations suggesting that employees who must use public transportation to get to work should not return to the physical workplace yet. Find out what challenges your employees are facing, and when possible, offer options such as flexible work hours so people can travel during off-peak times. Consider that risks that your employees may face on their journey to and from work and how you can help alleviate them. Productivity is always a concern, and right now there are potentially big challenges to your employees' productivity. For those of you whose organizations are currently working from home, I recommend asking employees whether they think they'll be more productive in the office. That could be a major factor for the return to the physical workplace. If most employees do not think that they'd be more productive in the office, that feedback could initiate a broader conversation about whether a return to the physical workplace is even necessary to take on at this time. Overall, it's important to consider how confident your employees feel in general about a return to the physical workplace. Asking provides a good overall measure that, when combined with those other questions in this module, gives you the ability to dig into specific areas of concern so you can identify any reasons for low confidence. Think about the previous topics regarding a return to the physical workplace as the levers that can move the dial on this overall confidence measure. If your employees feel safe, have reliable caretaking options, are able to get to and from work and feel productive, then they'll likely have higher levels of confidence in a return to the physical workplace. So now we've reviewed all of the drivers necessary to establish and maintain workplace resilience. The next question is how to measure and monitor them. At Achievers, as I noted, our mission is to change the way the world works. And that means not just talking about what's important, but actually driving action. And that's why we've created 2 surveys to support you in measuring workplace resilience and benchmarking a return to work confidence. I'll talk about them one at a time. The Critical Event Resilience Survey. Using the 8 drivers we discussed, the Achievers Workforce Institute embarked on an effort to provide tools to address workplace resilience today. We leveraged current academic and business research to create a survey and toolkit focused on measuring and acting upon this critical business model. We've talked about what resilience looks like and the key drivers that underpin it. The purpose of this survey is to give you a clear path forward to measure and respond to each driver to build that overall resilience that will serve you well today and into the future. Now, the great thing about the Workplace Resilience Survey is that it can be run on any survey platform. While Achievers customers are using the Achievers platform to reach as many of their employees as possible, use existing survey tools, such as SurveyMonkey, to share these questions with your employees through email. Remember, manager communication is key to encouraging employees, and particularly with survey participation. So make sure that your managers are talking to their teams about the survey and specifically about why it's important to complete it.